What does it really mean to lead through disruption? Today's guest, Jim Stallings, has built a career on that question. As the founder and general partner of PS27 Ventures, Jim invests in companies using AI to reshape industries, from fintech to B2B software. Before that, he led multi-billion-dollar divisions at IBM, served as a Marine Corps captain, and helped bring enterprise innovation to life at global scale. He's here to share hard-won lessons on leadership, transformation, and why every company must learn to disrupt or be disrupted. Jim, thanks so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Elaine, for having me. This is quite an honor.
Awesome. So, just based on that bio alone, I have several questions that I want to dive in on, but I really want to get down to the nitty-gritty and play a game first with the two of you, if that's okay.
Oh, let's do it.
I like games.
All right. Okay. So let's play a little bit of rapid fire here. So Jim, this first one's for you. What's one book that has profoundly shaped how you approach innovation or leadership?
It's probably goes all the way back to a book that I read called The Innovator's Dilemma. And it really was about, do you cannibalize your product? How do you, if you've got a market position, how do you, cannibalize your product or innovate? I mean, you're in a dilemma of whether you take on the new challenge or defend the old. Kristen Kleitner, I was thinking of his name way back.
Well, and it's such I've read that too. It's such a good book, and it is so foundational. And I think what's really interesting, I know we're going to get into this later, but like that book was written a couple decades ago now, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And yet I feel like we're living it more than ever, right?
Yeah.
We're living that tension more than ever. So yeah, that'll be fun. That's a good one that if folks haven't read.
It was one of the first ones I read about innovation, because we were at the time in the IBM company, we were facing, a new set of challenges, and everybody went out. That was the book du jour, and everybody went out and read it, and the principles, you're right, are relevant today, probably more than ever.
It's almost a book ahead of its time.
Yeah, it was.
Okay, next one's for Ian. Ian, what's a guilty a guilty pleasure app or tool that you can't live without?
Oh man. Okay, I'm not allowed to say TikTok anymore because I said it too much to be true. So I'm gonna say, actually, no, I'm gonna share my new favorite. I don't think this is a guilty pleasure, to be honest. I just kind of love it. Howie. Like, my new buddy Howie is my AI scheduling assistant. And I have played with so many of these things, and none of them have worked. And I'm falling in love with my buddy Howie, which is an AI-driven service to help with calendar management. And at this point, 3 weeks in, I don't think I can live without it.
Oh, wow. That's a good
so
one. Look it up.
What makes Howie so special, Ian?
Howie's friendly. Howie's named Howie. Howie's it's an AI scheduling system that works via email and other multi-channel interactions, SMS, et cetera. But something about it sufficiently walks the line between sort of, acting in the way that a really good human EA would act, but also not obviously being automation and AI. It's not pretending beyond the name. Something about it just kind of straddles this line of utility and delight that I like. And so, yeah, I'm pretty excited. Doesn't replace admin support or our back office, but really complements it.
It's a good tool.
Yeah, it's a tool.
Oh, that's much cooler than my guilty pleasure app.
What's yours?
I don't honestly, there's too many ads for it out there that probably drive people nuts. So I don't even want to say it out loud, but it's one of those little Candy Crush style,
I hate those
you have
things.
I don't know why, but it's when I need to turn off my brain and just play these little puzzles and decorate a room or a castle or something. I don't know. It's so stupid. Mine. It's stupid.
The ones I like are distractions, right? From not work apps like Alpha Dots. I don't know if you about that one. It's on Bloomberg every day.
Yeah.
It's like Wordle, what the time is doing.
Ooh, yeah.
It's you have to guess the words and connect the dots. So it's a physical game, anyway, it gets me away.
Actually, wait, like let's get into this. This is actually innovation in a way. Like, it's really interesting. Like, New York Times has their games, Bloomberg's got their games. Yeah. I've recently gotten into the LinkedIn games, and I don't know if you guys play them, but they've got like 4 or 5 that I play actually religiously every day, so I can maintain my streak and beat all of my colleagues and all that good stuff. But it's really interesting, right? Like, these little, I feel like this is actually fairly new, these little moments of gamification within the umbrella of other sort of media or network places that you go. And I don't know, now I play them every day.
Yeah. I mean, every platform, if you think about it, they're trying to find ways to keep you engaged.
Yeah.
And they're, at the bottom, right? You've sort of read the news or you read the report and you've done what you got to do. And at the bottom, it's sort of a comic relief moment, right? But it keeps you on the platform. So
it's monetization of the most, literally the one thing that is finite, which is time. And so they're getting they're squeezing every bit of monetization out of it. Well, see, Jim, thanks for really bringing me down. I'm like, oh, they're being nice, they're entertaining us. And Jim's like, no, man, they're driving engagement.
Yeah. And they're learning about you, by the way.
That's true.
They're insights into, what you don't know. And, they're just ways that they can feed the algorithm about you.
They can. And it required somebody to think a little bit differently. Like, that is interesting. Like, it required, like, if I think of Bloomberg, I think of essentially an information sharing organization. Yep. Like, that is what I think of. Like, it's news and data. And it required somebody to think very differently at some point about something that maybe seems trivial and small, but actually might be quite consequential.
Yeah. And I'm sure they laughed at the team in the beginning that proposed it. They said, get out of here. And now, here it is.
And now look at it. This makes me think of 2 things. And I think there's one about being human that inherently makes you more receptive to things that are gamified. Because when I think about it, like, I am more likely to go the speed limit when there's one of those digital signs that has a green happy face. And I'm like, got to get the happy face. Like, I got to get from yellow to green. And I've noticed, like, they just put this up in my neighborhood and everybody is going the speed limit because I think we're all trying to. And I think, too, the more that we have kind of like the Howies of the world and AI starts to sort of accelerate, I feel that those little gamification structures that cause you to have to think or solve a puzzle or a problem or something like that, I think is really good for our cognition. And I'm not saying, I don't know if that's like why they're doing it. Like you said, it is likely for engagement, but it's really good for us. It's almost like hiding the medicine in the sugar. Like,
yeah. Plus, we tend to associate games with kids and younger people, right? And it gives us a chance to play. Old people like me, it makes us like, okay, we're playing too, so we're having fun too while we're doing serious reading and writing and work. So, and we tend to have that inside of us anyway, and it brings it out, and we want to come back to it. We get attached to it.
Have either of you heard about the tunnel lighting projects that sort of like gamify the speed at which you're driving through tunnels? Like, I think there's a big one in Sydney and another one in Scandinavia. You know what I'm talking about? Jim's nodding a little. It's actually really cool. This is a total tangent, but what they do is they use lights on the side of the tunnel, like light rings or things to basically to pace you. To pace you at the speed you should be going. And it's not to slow you down. It's to speed you up, because drivers lose context. We all know, like, you start going uphill, you slow down without thinking, you cause a traffic jam. You're going through a tunnel, you slow down. And so apparently, drivers are like, oh, I got to keep up with the light. Right. They do.
Yeah.
I love this stuff.
Consistency matters in traffic. Right. So
it's everything.
I just bought a new car and it has a heads-up display in it. Now, when I was early in my military career, in fighter cockpits, they had something called a heads-up display. It was allowed the fighter pilot to look forward, and instead of looking down at their dials, for speed and altitude and all that, it was reflected literally in the canopy. So I got one of those in my car, and
isn't that cool?
And to your point about colors, I get red, green, yellow, all kinds of things. And by the way, there's a button you can hit on it that says augmented reality. So now the street becomes almost like a game. It's got lines. So if I'm driving and I bump it, I'm crossing the lines, it's in the display. It turns a color, it blinks. I mean, all kinds of things.
Oh, I haven't. That's neat. That's a step above the heads up I've used.
Yeah. So it's where everything is going now, right? So I don't have to look at my dials. I don't look at my speed. I don't have to, know if I'm actually crossing the lane. It tells me, it shows me, and it's in my line of sight when I'm looking forward. The other thing I found out that, and I found this out the hard way, is that there's, I would look away at my phone and I would get this beep. And I was wondering, how does it know that I'm looking away? Well, I found this device right above the steering wheel that looks at my eyes.
Yep.
And it sort of can see a human face. And if you don't see the eyeballs in a certain position, it lets you know. Yep. So anyway, now it's a little bit of a game between me and the car to see if I can trick it. And here's what I learned. I can hack it by wearing my sunglasses. Yeah. Because it won't see my eyes. And anyway, so
and it's not smart enough
how to get away with it, but it's all a game.
Wow. Well, it is gaming. It is gaming. Oh, that's cool. Yeah. Well, I want your heads up display. All right. Let's that's cool. What's the next question?
Okay. Next question for Jim. If your company had a mascot, what would it be?
Well, it would be my dog. Because my dog Bentley, is the most popular. He's way more popular than I am, it turns out. Everybody knows him. Everybody in the community knows him. A neighbor knows everybody. So he would be the mascot. I mean, he's well known, and on LinkedIn, I refer to him as Bentley the talking dog. Cute. Because over the years, I've learned how, what his language is, and he's learned mine, and we talk all the time. So anybody has a dog will know what I'm talking about. But
100%.
Yeah, he actually is the company mascot. Everybody, when they talk to me, they don't ask me how am I doing. They say, how's Bentley?
Yes, I think we all you have to take that as a compliment.
Yeah, I do. And he does too.
Love that. Okay, Ian, last question before we move on. What is a skill that future leaders absolutely need to master?
Oh, iteration. Like creating an environment where the team can iterate. Mm-hmm. And this is, I'm talking my own book here a little bit, like with innovation, right? But like we're on an innovation podcast, so why not? But there are some fundamentals of leadership involving vision, discipline, and, sort of setting up an environment of success that I think span all times. But you talk about future leaders. I think we're living in a world that is less predictable every year, every month, every day, requires more adaptability, and adaptability is fundamentally a process of iteration. And so that's it. And I think that's tough. I think that's really tough for a lot of leaders today.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, technical leaders are disciplined. And many times that gets in the way of what you're describing, right? Because they have a clear focus on, I've got to build this feature or capability the way I see it. And in today's world, the way you see it, the need may be different in 6 months.
Yeah.
So you've got to be ready to iterate, to use your word or the questions word there. So that's a critical skill.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, I think so. And I think it's, I think it's tough. I think we should talk, and we're going to get into the meat here. I think we should talk about that in a little bit because, I've spent a lot of time in large organizations that really, really struggle with kind of, moving the train onto a different track, or whatever metaphor I want to use here.
Yeah.
And I think that's getting more important every day. Well, yeah. So Lane, let's dive in.
Yeah. Actually, so I think that this is a really good place to segue. So I would love to know more, just kind of like some of the steps that have led you throughout your career, you know, from military to large corporation, and then ultimately you started your own venture firm. And so, you know, why leave? What possessed you to want to go out on your own and start something new?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if there's a word for it, but I've always felt this like I was a pioneer. That I was, you know, I've always looked for the edge of change, and some of it began when I was a young kid. I was the first in my family to graduate from high school,
Hmm.
and I was the first to ever go to college, you know, to the Naval Academy, and you know, I was the first to, you know, get into, you know, be an officer in the Marine Corps. I mean, things, and I've just always found throughout my career that on the edge is where the most fun is and the biggest challenge.
Mm,
And it inspired me to go in the Marine Corps. I just felt like, well, that's, you know, who's the toughest group I could get in, and it was Marine. So, and I felt like if I could do that, it'll prove something to me and others around me, and I'll learn a hell of a lot in the process. So, and then technology came into my life, and I just always sort of looked for what's the hot new big hard thing. And if you look at my career in the IBM company, I was always either in a business that was in trouble trying to fight its way back to relevance, or I was on the bleeding edge of something and we had to go make it a business. And you know, I can share lots of examples of it, but that's it. So when I left IBM, it was just natural for me to say, well, let's go invest in all these new technologies. And in the short time I've been doing this, it's changed dramatically what we invest in. But I've found it's kept me fresh and relevant and talking about the important things and learning about the important things in business and life. And that's just sort of been a spirit inside of me from the beginning, because there were no examples when I was growing up. There were no examples of any of these things around me.
Yeah.
And reading about them, I think inspired me. I'm going to go. There's a big world out there, and I'm going to go discover it.
Is that spirit like what I want to know? What inspired you to that step into the Naval Academy? Because, you know, first high school, first college, like these are a sort of pioneering big steps. I want to know, what was it that drove you to the path of the Naval Academy? Because I suspect, and I'm going to ask this in a little bit, that was foundational maybe in setting up what your post-military steps were.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, I'll tell you a quick story. When I was a kid, the moment it all sort of clicked, I don't know how old it was, maybe 12 or 11. Um, it was a Saturday morning. I was outside in my front yard playing with my buddies. And on a Saturday morning, you know, we're throwing rocks at things and chasing cats and climbing
Yep.
trees and chasing girls and, you know, things that little boys do. And there was a taxi cab that pulled up out in front of our street, and it was a sidewalk. And this military person got out of the taxi in their uniform, and they were walking down the sidewalk where in front of our homes. It was an apartment complex. So he
Yep.
passed, you know, my buddy's Kevin's house, and then he passed Alfred's house, and then he eventually passed my house where we were playing, and we stopped and stared at him, and then he was walking ramrod straight down the sidewalk, and we fell in behind him almost as a joke and got in the line, and we were giggling and walking behind him, and he
Amazing.
stopped and turned around and looked at us, you know, which scared us, and he did a hand salute and turned around and walked away. And that sort
Incredible.
of burned something in my mind. And I discovered later that was a US Marine. I learned what the uniform was sometime later. And I said, I want to do that because, it stunned us. There was nobody in our neighborhood, that was sort of looked like that or walked like that, and I just gravitated towards that. And I learned about what the Marines were. And then the question was, why did you become a Marine officer?
Yeah.
All these options. And I said, well, I want to go to the Naval Academy. That's hard to do. So that was it. I mean, it was, images matter in life, especially with young people. If you're around bad images, that has an effect. But then if you see something positive, it could inspire someone, and it inspired me. And that's how my life got going, and that's what it was. So everything from that moment was, how do I get to that? How do I get to the academy? I get a commission in the Marine Corps, be an officer. I wanted to lead troops from day one, from when I was 11.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, I mean, that was a visualization. Like all of us were there with you, which is really cool. And I love the focus, I guess, that it brought at a young age. That's really cool. And I also love how it connects to something that you said earlier, Jim. You said it's more fun at the edge. I think you used slightly different words, but it's true. And, certainly by reputation, right? The U.S. Marine Corps is an organization of course, discipline and grit, but living at the edge in many ways, right? Yeah. And figuring out how to get it done. And I think that's really, really interesting. I'm curious. I want to ask you about some of those stories from the time at IBM, some of the cool stuff that you worked on and what that taught you about innovation. And I'll set up a little context. Like we were talking about before the show, I had a brief stint at IBM, and it was interesting because I was there as an intern, and it was at a time where the company was, I think, at least in popular sentiment, struggling. Trying to figure out how to navigate a transition from what felt like a technology organization to or of a services and consulting organization was certainly the public sentiment. But here's the reason I mention this. I walked in as an intern to Almaden in just outside of San Jose in Silicon Valley into the research facility. And I was surrounded by the biggest nerds, the maddest of mad scientists. There was like a particle accelerator in the other cubicle next door. There was a button on the wall that would evacuate and recycle the air in the entire facility. This is like a bunch of cubicles and offices in case of a chemical leak. And I was like, holy cow, like there's research, engineering, and science happening here. So all of that existed for decades within IBM. So I would love to hear some of your stories. Like, what are some of those, cutting edge projects you worked on, and what did that teach you about both what works and what doesn't in bringing innovation to market?
Yeah. Well, probably one of the most interesting, maybe the most interesting and most impactful assignments I got one day was to run the Linux business. This was around 2000, early 2000s, 2005-ish time frame. I was in Orlando in a sales meeting. I got a phone call from a gentleman back in New York that says, you got a new assignment. And at the time I was in sales, and he said, I said, what is the assignment? He said, well, we want you to take over the Linux business. And I said, what is Linux?
Good start.
And he said, it's open source software. Yep. And I said, what's open source software? I'm a hardware guy, right? And he said, it's free. It's free software. And I remember saying, I'm the greatest sales guy in the IBM company, and you want me to do free software. I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I want to go do something hard, like sell big stuff. He says, no. You got to understand, the business is small. Linux is small now, and we want to make it big. And I was arguing with him. I said, look, I'm a the greatest sales guy in the company. I want a big assignment. This is a little assignment. What do you want me to do here? And he says, look, come back to New York and we'll talk about it. So I fly back to New York. I sit down and I get with him. And he says, we're in a transformative moment. Mm-hmm. Windows is dominant. It had at the time like 98% market share on the desktop.
Yep.
And we're going to disrupt that. And I said, what the hell are you doing with me? I mean, I got no chance of being successful at this. I'm going to fail. I want a career. You're trying to end my life here. And he says, no, we can do it. So what is the strategy? And he said, we're going to do it with customers. Anyway, I said, okay, I'm in. Because at the time, the other part of me kicked in. Okay, now I like a challenge. I want to, beat somebody in the marketplace and customers. I'm a sales guy. This is good. But I didn't consider myself a technologist. He was a technologist, and we became a pair. Me being customer focused, he was technology focused, and we took Linux inside of the IBM company from what was probably less than $100 million business to $7 billion over a few years, like 3 years. And we did it with techniques and tactics that were on the edge of acceptability in the IBM company. Because as you know, IBM was by the book. Yep. And we had to do some things that were off book, not in the book. They were unwritten.
And what were some of those things? Because for sure there was that's a wonderful story of, I think, a fundamentally different way of thinking about revenue and monetization attached to technology. Because you're like, I'm a sales guy. You want me to sell free? What? Yeah. But there's a real business that was very different. But what?
We had to create it.
How'd you get off book? How did you do it?
Yeah. So we realized early on that here's the other component to the story is inside of IBM, right? Linux was an organism that was to be killed because it was disruptive to the operating systems
and the application sets that we had,
right? So it was like, we're going to embrace, a virus. Okay. And so we found early on that the enemy was inside and the enemy was Microsoft on the outside.
Yeah.
And we had to convince the customer to adopt this capability. And that was the only way we convinced the people inside of IBM and bring this disruption to the market. So that was the dilemma, but it was a case of survival. Our servers, our operating systems wouldn't be relevant if it wasn't able to run Linux systems. And if it was, it would be disruptive to, Microsoft in a stranglehold. Now, fast forward to today, Linux is the most pervasive operating system in the world. Yep. Even Microsoft, you get your Surface tablet, it comes with Linux. So, it's a great, victory for us. And IBM at the time was a technology leader. And it was almost anathema to us to embrace this. And our CEO had the vision to do it and the courage to do it. And we did it, and it allowed customers to say, well, if IBM is endorsing this, and we had big customers, the biggest banks in the world, the biggest governments in the world, the biggest manufacturers, they were saying, if you guys will endorse this, it must be something to it. And that was so we had programs and techniques and pilots and trials. We made it very public. The big weapon we had in all of this was the patent portfolio. I discovered this later in the process.
Yep.
The patent portfolio in the IBM company was 39,000 patents across every industry that you could imagine.
Yep.
Medical, legal, you name it. But anyway, we used the patent portfolio to inject features and patents into Linux to make it powerful. And the more powerful it got, the more applications it could run, and the more equity it had between Windows and Linux.
Yes.
And as we close that gap over time, the customer says, this is as good and cheaper than Windows. And that was the strategy, the core of the strategy.
And it's really interesting because, like, you know, we are talking like these are giants battling in the market, right?
Oh, this was intergalactic warfare.
It's intergalactic warfare, and I'm gonna give you some of the perspective from the other side of the trenches there in a second, because I was at Microsoft at the time, but I didn't mention that before we started chatting. But it's interesting because you said something I want to highlight. You said I had to use the voice of the customer to convince people internally. And doesn't that feel so classic? Like you've got executive team with vision. Yeah. You've got people, you know, at kind of, you know, in the field, like you were a field and sales leader, executive. You probably had great people working for you that were executing this, but you had all kinds of blockers, probably a lot of middle management, product owners, things like these antibodies that exist. Yeah. You use the voice of the customer, it sounds like, to manage the battle within. Is that fair?
Yes. I mean, the other thing we did was we formed a coalition with other like-minded companies. You know, Novell was out there, Sony was out there, a lot of companies that were not IT companies, but they were very interested in propagating a newer solution in the market for primarily the desktop and eventually all operating systems out there. So Sony, I mean, there were, you know, Philips. They had large patent portfolios as well. Mm-hmm. So they sort of adopted the strategy we adopted. And there were about 7 companies. They put a lot of money in, but more importantly, put a lot of patents in. Again, we were feeding the open system to make Linux stronger, more powerful, more capable. And that caught the eye inside of IBM. Now, this, as you mentioned, there were people that were ready to, you know, burn my car in the process because this was different. You know, and then
hang on, it's different, but like people don't burn cars because they're different. People burn cars because you are striking at the heart of their own incentives or their own self-esteem or their own something, right? Like I don't think we should underplay that.
Yeah. I'll give you another example of that. So we said we're going to enable Linux inside of the IBM company. We got to get it good enough to where it's good enough to be on one of our systems and good enough to support our customers' solutions, right? Yeah. And at the time, there were 5 systems, you know, hardware platforms. The mothership of the IBM company was the mainframe. Mm-hmm. We decided we're going to put it on the mothership. Now, this was like, you know, deciding we're going to, you know, have a party in the Vatican, you know, with a rock band or something. I mean, this was totally like, everybody wanted us to start with something small, you know, do it with the, you know, the low end X series servers, you know, the Intel servers, that if it doesn't work, nobody will know. The mainframe, which is the holy grail of profit and growth, and it's in the biggest enterprises in the world. They said, yes, we'll start there. So literally people threw us out of their offices, but we did it. And because it was in large enterprise, these big systems were in large enterprise with very large customers. I mean, the biggest banks in the world. We said, if we start the revolution there, it'll be easy to go downhill. And that's what happened. I mean, and it turned out it solved another problem. And we didn't think about it at the time, but we had another problem in that the mainframe was shrinking. It was being disrupted by other low-end servers, and the internet was coming. And so we said, let's put Linux on the mainframe. And guess what happened? It stemmed the decline, and it actually started growing.
Interesting.
So it was counterintuitive. So then the mainframe people were like, we love this thing called Linux. And once we got the mainframe team in love with this thing, it was so easy to get the rest of the village.
Yeah, you got the hero.
Yeah.
And it is really, there's something else really interesting here. Like, you guys saw the disruption, right? You saw it happening around you. You knew that, the mainframe business as it was shrinking. It was getting highly pressured, right? You knew that there were other changes happening. You obviously knew about like Microsoft's position in desktop and, across IBM's portfolio. You saw it. So you weren't blind, but the challenge was, to rally people to react appropriately. And I want to use this to talk about something else that you talk about, actually. You've said it's on your LinkedIn, actually, that innovation should be the core offensive strategy of any company, either disrupt or be disrupted. Was it at IBM, or is that something that you sort of learned since and try and institute more systematically?
No, it started at IBM, and it started from some of the experiences I was just sharing, right? I was learning as I was going through that when you look back over time, these technological—
Sounds to me like you were playing defense, though. Like, sorry to interrupt. Like, that story sounded a little bit like not defense. Like you weren't in a fighting retreat here, but you were reacting to others around you rather than being proactive.
Yeah. We needed growth. Growth, and we weren't getting growth, and we needed a play to get growth. We also needed to change the dynamic of the market, right? So that the leverage was not on Windows in Microsoft, right? Because we didn't, right? We just didn't have it at that segment. And again, the lower end of the market, everything not mainframe was growing, and the core was or everything else was growing, and the core wasn't. So we had to participate in where the growth was. So Linux was one way to get there, but I mean, it was through a whole series of innovation. I'll tell you another place I learned about disruption was and innovation was I got another assignment where I was called to run the intellectual property division of the IBM company. And my reaction was the same. I'm like, wait a minute, that sounds like lawyers. I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I'm a Marine. I mean, what am I doing here? And part of it was for me, I think management was saying, look, you need to learn some things. And as I mentioned before, we had 39,000 patents, and it was across a whole range of industries. Now, what I learned in that was the battle many times is won not at the point of the sale. It's at the moment and point of invention and innovation. So in that job, running the intellectual property division, I got a chance to work with researchers in the IBM company. And if there's a secret in the company, it was the engineers and inventors in research, because they had the freedom to look out beyond today and were relieved of the pressure of a quarter, making a quota, and invent things. And I would spend hours and days with them on the future. And I was discovering that many years before the customer feels the need to change, they've seen the innovation or created the innovation to change. So they were working, and that's when I began to see, well, this happens early, right? If it's a fad, you're late. If it's popular and selling briskly, you're late. So, and the people that makes the most money are the people that invent it and adopt it early, not, it's when it's commoditized and it's available to everyone. So those are just lessons I learned working in the patent business. I learned, and many people don't know this, but because IBM had so many patents across so many different industries, it generated over $1 billion of free cash flow, which could fund innovation.
You can do a lot with that.
People wanted to either use the patents or buy the patents or get assignments of the patents. Of course, it's just, it's just money. So I didn't even know this existed. Remember, I was a sales guy. I just thought it was about hand-to-hand combat. If you're stronger, you just beat the guy up and you win. Yeah. And you find the battle is won long before that.
So when's the right moment to strike? Like in terms of, so you've got these teams of people that you said have built solutions that customers don't even know they have a problem yet.
Yeah.
But you have to adopt it early. So how do you know when that right moment is to introduce something brand new to the market?
Yeah. I don't know. It depends on what it is. But here's what I learned along the way. You have to. The other lesson I learned in this was it's not your core customer that's going to be the change agent. It's going to be the competition of the customer many times. The smaller emerging capability that's in market, that's open and ready. I'll give you a great example. When back to the Linux business, we found the emerging markets: Brazil, Russia, India, China, Korea, Africa. We started there. We found they were ready. They didn't have the incumbency of these other technologies.
You were either leapfrogging or deploying new.
And so we found, this is one of the things I learned, was that these emerging markets and emerging industries will leapfrog. So we found those were the early. So we sort of pivoted from some things and went to these other markets, and it caught on fire. I mean, it was cheap, it was free, it was not free, but relatively less expensive, and they didn't have the incumbency. We went into I remember going to the Social Security Administration in Ghana. They ran the Social Security Administration on paper. So we said, why don't you buy our systems? They said, great, we'll buy you systems with Linux. They said, great. This is a great price. It's great. And by the way, they had, because it was open source, they had a familiarity with these, leading edge things that, you just didn't have. In New York, it would have been less receptive to it. So anyway, that was the other part of the strategy. So I learned early on, it's not just the invention, it's where you plan it first. You have to think quickly through, where do I launch it? And it's sort of an outside in strategy that you have to deploy.
So let's fast forward a bit. This is fascinating, and we could talk, I think, forever about some of the dynamics that exist in the large enterprises and that we could learn from. But let's fast forward a bit. You're running a venture fund now. You're working with founders, with early stage entrepreneurs. How does this inform your work, and how does this inform the conversations that you have with entrepreneurs and founders every day?
Yeah. Well, we have a process where we vet founders, and we vet the founder before we vet really the technology. We tend to start with what is the problem set that they're trying to solve. I mean, we talk about the quality of the problem and the quality of their leadership. I mean, so if they're solving an urgent big problem, that's high on the scoring, right? If it's a low level problem for a small customer set, that's way on the scoring. So we tend to be looking at that. We look at the quality of the business model. Does it have, is it sticky? Is it recurring revenue? Is it a platform that could evolve out of this where it could do more than a feature, but thousands of features? And of course, we look at the quality of founder. And that's key to me. That's 90% of it for us. Do they have a plan? Do they have a vision for how this could play out? It doesn't mean this is how it's going to play out, but do they know how it could play out?
Yeah.
Right. And it doesn't have to be true. I'm just looking for, have they thought about the next 5 years? You get funded, what does that do to the company this year and next year? Then you get funded maybe again. What does that do? I mean, have they even thought about that? Are they a leader? Do they have the style, the temperament, the emotional intelligence to attract people in? because you won't grow without people that are really good. And the war for talent is ferocious in technology. And people leave toxic environments and toxic leaders for less reasons than money. It's because they want to work in places where. So I look hard for that. And then a lot of it is, are they adaptable? I mean, can they change with the environment, with the speed and pace of change? And sometimes, as I mentioned early on, technology leaders in many cases they're engineers, a lot of them, and they're very disciplined and structured, and they resist visions, that are not theirs. So I look for that.
Well, and that's like, I mean, that's really interesting because that feels more important than ever today. I wanted to ask you, as you've been doing this for a little while, and you've been in and around the world of technology and innovation longer. What has been, like, at a macro level, what's been changing? And then how does that impact these attributes that you look for in your investments?
Yeah, no, I think the attributes are still relevant. I think the only other attribute I think has emerged is a financial acumen. For these founders need to have that. They just need to, because these investments require, particularly around AI, enormous amount of new capital and multiple raises. So they need to have a financial depth to be able to work with investors. We're early stage, but the next set of stages, the people are very sophisticated when it comes to understanding capitalization of these companies. The other thing that I would say has changed is speed. I was speaking yesterday with the head of AI from Microsoft, and he said, they now own GitHub, which is Copilot in the world, which does coding, for developers. And they're saying in their customer set, 30% of the coding is being done with Copilot.
Yep.
30%. They think in less than 1 year, it'll be 60%. And in less than 18 months, it'll be 80%. Now that's speed. I grew up in a world where people would wrap around the block to wait on Windows in a box, a CD-ROM, right?
Windows 95 beta, been there.
Then it would be 3 years later for the next, Windows 98, right? I mean, I remember that. And so these are 6 months hurdles in terms of penetration, in terms of features and capability.
Yeah.
Right. Less than 2 years ago, chat was out. We're on Chat GPT 5.
Yep.
In 6 months, there'll be different versions. When it first came out, it was a cute little query machine. You ask it a question, and it was so cute, you get an answer.
Yeah.
Now, just a couple weeks ago, Chat announces we've got embedded finance with Walmart, meaning you can go to Chat, to their browser, you can search walmart.com, you go to walmart.com, and within it, you can ask it a question. I'm doing a Halloween party for 30 kids on my block. What are all the things I need to buy? This is the kind of question I would ask, because I'm a long ways away. Anyway, it would create that list, and you now can purchase it. So the financial function is, right? So the search, the list, the answer to my question, the pricing, you get, the schedule.
It's almost full agency or full assistance.
Exactly. So now think about that. It was 18 months ago when we were doing little innocent queries. Now, e-com today is changed. So, and they'll go beyond Walmart. They'll, take on these others, and every other platform will have to do the same, or they won't be relevant. So speed, I would say, is the other. It's like when I opened, I said, it's like running of the bulls. You're getting chased down the street, and if you don't keep up pace, you'll get trampled.
Yeah, I think this speed thing is so interesting. I completely agree with you that it's a challenge for founders. It's a challenge for enterprises. But one of the things that I see, and I got to tell you, I'm still trying to figure out like what to do about this. Like we do lots of things. I'm still trying to figure out like what to do about this because I don't think the industry writ large really has any idea. Is that in order to keep up with the change in the world, incumbent organizations, they could be enterprises, could be government organizations, could be basically anything that's been around for a while. It feels like they have to know what's going on with startups. Not from a procurement perspective necessarily, just to get a sense of what might be possible, what is coming out of those R&D labs that I have to react to. Is this something that you spend time on with your portfolio companies?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So one of the challenges before we even invest with the company, we used to ask the question, who's your full stack engineer? Right? Who's your solution architect? Right? Our questions now with AI is how much of this are you building and how much is AI building? And if the answer is, oh, no, we don't do that. We're sort of old school. We do it by hand. That's a pass. Right? Now, and there's a lot of reasons for it. The biggest reason is cost for us, right? So there's so many tools out there and they're getting better by the day to do work in the stack. So, and there are tools and solutions that can replace what you could ever build, in the stack in days, not months and weeks and quarters, right? So we're looking for it from an efficiency standpoint. So what tools are you using for your developers, for your engineers? And they should be familiar with them. So we're looking for that.
Well, and it's not just like cost matters, right? But it's also the mentality of embracing these things, so that because otherwise you are just going to get left behind. So we have one of our portfolio companies. Like this is $1 billion company, and I was talking to the CEO, and he said something really interesting. It's like we don't have HR. Like they have a $1 billion company without a single HR person because they are AI native and were able to operationalize everything that they needed for their organization in tech. And I would never say that this is the right pattern for every company, but what it tells me is that is a founder and a CEO who understands the art of the possible and how to apply it to what he needs in that company. And so I get where you're coming from. And I think that's a skill that more and more all of us need to have these days. And I got to tell you, I personally struggle with it. I don't know if you do, but like I struggle with what does it mean to be AI native in everything I do day to day. And, I talked about Howie earlier, like I'm trying tools. I have vibe coded a whole lot of BS, to be perfectly honest, but, but like, it feels like something that is actually not only do we need to look for in our investments, but we need to look for in ourselves as innovators.
Yeah. We've started an exercise in our company. And really this is to help the founder. What are the high quality tools that we would recommend to you to use to do work? I mean, another example along the lines of some of what you were just describing is Harvey. Harvey is a legal agent, basically, that can, write documents, create documents, import documents, populate forms for a company, right? What does that do for a startup? It saves a lot of money. Okay. And it gets you a level of legitimacy with your investors and others and customers quickly without sort of having to employ. So the starter set is there a tool or an agent that performs? Because that performs the work that you're trying to do. Because the thing that we've learned is for the higher class tools, the accuracy is better than humans. And the speed and efficiency in terms of cost savings is better. And it flows to the bottom line. You need a lot less capital. Your runway is longer. So that, the other thing I'm witnessing is that the AI pricing is going up, but
it is. There's only so long VC capital can buy NVIDIA GPUs for all of us.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's going up. A lot of the large enterprises that are renewing these contracts, you started Copilot a year ago. When you go up for renewal, the prices are going up. So that's the other wave here that's coming.
Jim, we're kind of coming up on time here, but you said something earlier that really struck something with me. So I want to ask you a final hypothetical question for some of the founders that might be listening to this episode.
Mm-hmm.
So you talked about the two things that you're looking for when you invest in a company, and that's that they're solving a big problem and that they're a strong leader. So let's say two companies come to you and they both are solving the same big problem. And one of the leaders has a great plan, but they're not the greatest leader. One of the other leaders doesn't have a solid plan, but he's amazing with his people. They're running their team well. What matters more to you, strong, personable leadership or logistics?
Yeah, I mean the leadership matters the most. I mean, we we talk about this a lot when we decompose these companies. And I've said it somewhere, maybe in another podcast somewhere, that I would rather have a strong, passionate leader solving an important problem more so than a really big problem, price right, and all the dynamics, but a poor leader, right? So it's that's on average is the way we tend to look at it, and what I've learned to do. I'll give you a quick example. One of the best investments we ever made was in a company. This was one of the first investments we made about 5 or 6 years ago with our Rhea fund, and it was a company that came to us. It was a consumer products company, and it was a new version of coffee. And the analyst called me and said, "Jim, hey, we've got this company. We're in the middle of the pandemic, and I was at home. We weren't at the office." And I remember being in the backyard. I was on Zoom, and he said, "We're going to bring the founders on." And I said, "Look, I really don't want to. I don't think we should invest in coffee. This is a commodity. Everybody's got it. Starbucks. I mean, I gave him 10 reasons why we shouldn't do this." He said, "Jim, you really ought to talk to these guys because they're great." I said, "I don't care if they're great. This market is over. This market is over. It's done. We're VCs. Damn it. We're tech guys." And he said, "No, just listen." So we got them on, and they were describing this new market for wellness and coffee. And they had invented a technique to extract out of mushrooms some capabilities that help in 4 or 5 different areas in your health. And infuse it in coffee. And there was a big market for it. And I remember listening to them, and the whole time I'm thinking, we shouldn't do this, we shouldn't do this. But I closed my eyes, thinking, my God, how do I get out of this? But I was listening to them describe it. And I was thinking, these guys could sell anything. I mean, they were eloquent, they were factual, they were determined, they were passionate, they were smart, they were young. And I was sitting there listening with my eyes closed, and I was thinking, they can sell any damn thing. So we made a decision to go with the team because of the team, not the market. They're now the number one company in the category. They went from, at the time, less than $1 million. They'll do $500 million this year.
Wow.
So an amazing, growth. But it was the founders. And by the way, from that moment, they surprised me like every year with some new capability I didn't know they had in terms of leadership. And at the time, I think they were 29 years old. And I thought I had overcome every leadership challenge. They demonstrated, how do you go from 2 people to 600 people in 18 months and not miss a beat?
Wow.
That's so impressive.
It was scale. I mean, they learned how to, and they showed me some things about scaling the business and brand. But anyway, this was one of those where great founder, big market, hyper growth market. We thought it was a small problem. I was wrong at the outset, and it was probably one of our best investments.
Amazing. I love those stories. Okay, like, for what it's worth, we talk all the time internally at Alchemist about the fact that most of our biggest winners have surprised us, right? Not because, not in a like, oh, we thought they were awful and therefore, shouldn't have invested, but like, they surprised us. Like, it's the non-obvious bets. And I love hearing stories like that.
That'll be a legend in the company, years from now, when they exit. But
those guys almost passed on us, but
we almost passed. Yeah. I mean, as a matter of fact, I even they said, we got a better offer. They said, we really want to work with you, Jim. And we got a better offer for the guys in New York. I said, you ought to take it. I was thinking that's my way to get off the hook here. Right. So you ought to take it. They said, no, we want it. So they took a lesser number because we have a process
for persistence.
To work with them. Yeah, it was. They were also persistent. So it was great.
I love it.
I love
Well, this has been a really fun conversation, Jim. I thank you for coming on Innovators Inside. It's been a pleasure. As we wrap here, for folks in our audience who want to get in touch, stay in touch, what's the best way to follow your work? Head to your website? Are you on LinkedIn? Where should they go?
No, I'm on LinkedIn. I mean, the best way to see what we're doing is on LinkedIn. We do quite a bit of work outside of our venture fund. We've created a foundation, the PS27 Foundation, to work with entrepreneurs to not only educate them, train them, bring them information like what we've talked about directly to them, connect them with other investors. So we've done that for 10 years. So they should follow PS27foundation.org or follow PS27 Ventures, or, find me on LinkedIn, find the company on LinkedIn. That's the fastest, best way to keep up.
Amazing. And we'll have all that linked in the show notes, of course. But
thank you so much, Jim.
Yeah. Jim, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for coming on Innovators Inside, and good luck in your race to the weekend.
Yep, great. Thank you so much. It was quite a joy to be with you.